Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode here at the Damage Report. I am John Iadarola, and we are already dealing with a few issues tech-wise, but we're hopefully going to get that all fixed. There's a bit of a stream problem initially, and unfortunately, that's one of those things that it's impossible to know what's going to happen until it actually happens. So that's fun. But you know what's more fun? My guest today, who's going to be joining me for the first half of the show, DC Bureau Chief at The Intercept and contributor to the Young Turks, Ryan Grimm. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Glad to have you on, and glad that it looks like things are working right now. You never know when a camera's going to go out, the audio is not going to broadcast the stream, or the entire thing's going to crash. So thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you doing that. We got a lot of topics that we're going to talk about. Really fast, though, I'm curious how you're adapting to this. I mean, obviously, your job has got to look pretty different day to day with these new conditions.
Sure. Somebody who covers, politics, Congress, political campaigns, that's certainly throws a wrench into all of that. Congress has fled Washington, has effectively abdicated for the time being to President Trump. Campaigns are pivoting to, phone banking, digital texting, Facebook ads, but they're still going on. But the contest there is over how and when they're going to happen, because there are still a lot of election officials who are delusional about the idea of having in-person elections, and so are dragging their feet on implementing full kind of mail-in elections. And so, but there's still a lot of live primaries to be covering. You've got Morgan Harper taking on Joyce Beatty in Ohio. You've got a whole slew of them in New York and New Jersey, where incumbents everywhere from Josh Gottheimer to Yvette Clarke to open seats with Jose Serrano retiring to Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney. A ton of people are still getting challenged. But what does that look like? In New York, it really helps to go face to face, apartment to apartment. What does a campaign look like when you can't do that? And of course, working while you have kids who are at home who are supposed to be learning and who don't get that idea. And what do you mean? I'm not in school. Why am I doing school? Yeah. This makes no sense. And I hear that, but that's what we've got to try to do anyway. So, but these are historic times that we're living through, and I have it about as good as I could hope for, or anybody could ask for, really.
Yeah, I consider myself pretty lucky too. I can only imagine for the many people. We're just about to talk about unemployment, but the many people who had to pay rent and didn't have the money. Yeah. So we're gonna get to all that. Just immediately, I can see. Thank you to everybody who's already joined the stream. It's probably going to take a bit for everyone to flood in, considering that we had to restart it twice right there. But to those of you who are there, thank you already. Feel free to like and share that stream to get more people involved in the conversation. And Ryan, I can see a lot of people who are very excited to see you on the stream. Kagutsaki says, I have his book, We've Got People, on my desk right now. It's next on my to-read list.
Well,
that's
good.
Awesome.
And I'm planning on doing an update to it, with the presidential primary, which, and Bernie Sanders is going to stay in probably so long that I can probably kind of get that out while he's even still running, depending on whether or not he decides to throw it in or kind of push it all the way to the convention, which now just got moved again deeper into August. But thank you. I'm glad you're reading it. Simpler times back when people could leave their homes, but now's a good time to get through a lot of reading.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing a bit of rereading of some of the old classics I like. Okay, with that, well, we've got a lot to talk about. Why don't we jump right into the news? We knew that with the record-breaking unemployment numbers reported last week that it was likely that things would not suddenly rebound come this week, but it turns out that it's even worse than a lot of people thought that it might be. The U.S. Department of Labor registered just over 6.6 million initial unemployment insurance claims for the week ending March 28th. That easily surpasses the previous record set in last Thursday's release, which in turn shattered all previous records for initial unemployment filings. And I will say, as a fan of data visualization, this has been a great moment for charts that look really crazy. Like this is what you have to use to demonstrate. And that's going back to 1967. So you can see that
Yeah.
all of these recessions, including the Great Recession of a decade ago, they barely register as blips on that in comparison to the last 2 weeks. It's
Right.
crazy.
And I think we probably have a lot more coming. Um, and I think, to the credit of Congress, they did something about unemployment in the last stimulus, and they tacked on a slight bonus for people, because when you move from employed to unemployed, your unemployment check almost never, like 99.9% of the time, does not cover the income that you were making before. So there's a little bit of a bonus. But I'm sure for many, 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 many people, it is still not covering what they lost. And so, they have huge bills that are coming due, like you said, coming due today if you pay on time, or yesterday if you pay on time, over the next few days if you're the kind of person who doesn't. Which everybody knows precisely when their rent is due based on the contract. Everybody says the first, but it's like, oh wait, what does the contract say? The seventh? Okay,
Hmm.
and we're gonna get that in on the seventh. Um, so I think you have a lot more coming. I think you could easily see that number matched again next week, or perhaps even see a higher number. People are, and it has a kind of cyclical effect that as the number rises, that there's less money circulating, and the number of, say, restaurants and retailers that were open for carry out, that were hoping to hang on, might by over the next few weeks, a lot of them are going to start throwing in the towel as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess when people are saying there's estimates of 20 or 30% unemployment, that it's going to be these huge numbers. I mean, this is how you get to this, is a few more weeks
Right.
of
Right.
this, and I mean, I'm really curious, obviously, long term, what effect this is going to have. I mean, think about, like, if this lasts a few months for some individuals, let's say that hypothetically things do go back to normal at some point, that is still going to be a huge long-term impact on people's lives. The possibility that their businesses will have shut down, they might have lost apartments. I mean, God only knows. And so we're going to be seeing sort of ripple effects from this for the rest of our lives. This massive stone thrown in the pond of the American economy. I'm
Yep.
curious, in the short term, do you think that another set of huge numbers like this coming out, is that going to put more pressure on Congress to do even more, to perhaps not wait quite as long before passing the next set of recovery legislation?
Right. Each one of these weeks that where millions of people are filing for unemployment absolutely does put pressure on Congress to do something about this, because the way that American capitalism runs, and capitalism generally runs, is it has to run. You can't hit pause on it. There are quite reasonable calls for a rent moratorium, a mortgage moratorium, but even if you do that, that's not the only thing you have to do, because then you also have to take care of whoever was on the receiving end of that payment, not out of sympathy for that landlord, or that bank, or whoever was collecting that check, but because those institutions owe the money to other places, maybe in the form of credit to small businesses, or maybe in the form of refinances to homeowners. It's going to knock down their mortgage payment for the month. And so when all of that stuff comes to a halt, that's how a recession turns into a depression. That's what you saw in the early 1930s, that everything just came to a halt.
Hmm.
So in order to prevent that, you just have to keep pumping money into people's pockets. Like, canceling rent would be great. What would be even better is if the government just paid everybody's rent.
Hmm.
Just pick it up. We've got these next 3 months, the government says, or whatever, until people can get back out and get back to work, because not paying is great, but that can lead to the system seizing up. Better to just keep it greased and running, so that when this is all over, you have fewer of what you were talking about, which is those long-term implications. Because you don't want to come out of this with so much of the economy devastated that it's just effectively just dominated by Amazon and whatever private equity barons are still left. Like
Exactly.
that would be a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, we had this consolidation going on already where they were crowding
Right.
out. And like this is like the version of that. Like it could not be a stronger impact in the short term.
Right.
Um yeah, thank you to Miss Callie for your super chat. I do appreciate that. We're seeing a lot of love for you in the chat. In fact, I haven't seen a single reference to me, so congratulations
That's
to you.
good.
You've taken all
Come
of
on,
the
guys.
no.
They're bored with you. They see you here every day. So
Yeah,
this guy
exactly. No,
again.
this is the dream. When you bring a guest on, this is the effect that you want to see. There was a quick question from Name Withheld who says, "Does Ryan think Democrats should be more or less classified as centrist Republicans?" Um, I guess it's like a
Yeah.
philosophical question, but a case could be made, perhaps.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about American political history is that you really have very consistent political tendencies. You can call them on the right or the left, even though the kind of left didn't really develop until after the United States was formed. Like the idea of a left comes from the French Assembly,
Mm,
French Revolution, which is after 1776. But so you have these kind of political tendencies that have been similar, but they have changed names. People say, well, it's okay to start a third party because there used to be a Whig party, and then that was replaced.
mhm,
And then that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, but those parties represented political tendencies and ideas that have been fairly consistent. And so centrist Republicans or even liberal Republicans, 20 years ago, particularly in the Northeast and the Northwest, sometimes in the Midwest as well, you'd have uh, politicians who were in the Republican Party who today would,
mhm.
very very squarely fit as a kind of centrist Democrat. Some of them even as a progressive Democrat. So you could say the answer to that is yes, but in some ways it's also pointless. It's better to just kind of follow their politics rather than whatever label they happen to be
Yeah.
going by at the moment.
And Josh N, thank you for giving me some love in the super chat as well. Okay, with that, I want to turn to some of your recent work. So let's launch into a couple of the more recent articles that you've written. It's been just about a week since Ryan Grimm, who's on the show with me, his article in The Intercept about Time's Up and Tara Reade has been released. And we've seen since then some pickup in coverage of this story, but I would hardly say that in terms of CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, those sorts of things, it certainly doesn't seem like it's exploded. And so I'm curious for you, someone who's been working on this, what do you think about where this story is at, where it's likely to go? Is it going to have a bigger impact on the primary than it seems like at present the media is really interested in it having?
Right. We'll see. As I'm sure you and some of your viewers have noticed, there's a global pandemic going on.
I did notice that, actually.
Yes, if you turn on cable, they talk about it every now and then. Certainly there is a historic news cycle going on, which goes part of the way to explain kind of a lack of coverage. That doesn't go all the way to explain why, say, the Washington Post and New York Times haven't written articles about it. In other words, there's okay, cable, yeah, they're going to go for what's rating. They're going to go for what's on their minds. That's coronavirus 24/7. But the newspapers have different sections. They have different reporters dedicated to different beats. So it doesn't entirely explain that. Now, I think over the next week we'll have a more conclusive answer over the question of just how much they're going to cover, because news outlets, for very legitimate reasons, are slow and careful and deliberate in general in the way that they cover
Mhm.
allegations of these sort. A lot of people have compared it to the Christine Blasey Ford situation, but I don't think that that's entirely fair to the media for this reason. And like, for instance, I was the first to write about the Ford allegation, but there was a political dispute over the allegation, and that was the subject of my story. I wasn't able to investigate and kind of interrogate the allegation itself. What I could report was that Dianne Feinstein had been told about this allegation. Other members of the Senate Democratic Caucus, and particularly the Judiciary Committee, wanted to know more details about it,
Mhm.
and there was tension between them. And so I was able to report about that tension, where you don't exactly have that right now. You don't have the Biden camp split. You don't have the DNC curious about this. On the other hand, it certainly has exposed a lot of people for a willingness to believe women when the person that they're accusing happens to be a political opponent, versus the skepticism that they bring to bear when the accused is somebody that they politically support.
Yeah. So I've been reading some of the sort of response articles trying to separate fact from fiction and all that, and then they point out, similar to you, that like there's a reason that some of these investigations by Ronan and stuff take literally years. I totally get that. I don't think that means that the media hypothetically couldn't ask Joe Biden about it, of course. Like, it's one thing to do a full article, an in-depth piece. Like, that's going to take time. We'll see if after that time it actually happens. But they could certainly ask him about it. And at the same time, as you point out, like, noticing like the sort of convenient stripping away of social media activity about Christine Blasey Ford from certain Biden-affiliated Twitter accounts, like... we as reasonable people can look at that and say that says a little bit more about what they really think about believing women than perhaps they'd want to acknowledge publicly.
Yeah, and the Biden campaign has put out two comments, one from a former executive assistant and one from their spokesperson around this question. And oftentimes, when a presidential campaign will comment on something, even if it's just to deny it, media that have been holding off will use that public comment as a way to get into the story. And the headline will be, Biden denies allegations of sexual assault, because now, he's commenting on them publicly. The news outlet is not kind of endorsing or condemning them, just saying like, this is a live controversy that has risen to the level of an on-the-record denial from a presidential candidate, and you didn't see many outlets, even bother to cover that. At the same time, you see it trending on Twitter. You see alternative media, TYT, Crystal Ball's show, others in the kind of left alternative media covering it. Of course, the right wing is gleefully lapping it up, so that they can not only dunk on Joe Biden, they can dunk on the entire Me Too movement and call them all hypocrites. So they love it more than anybody. So I think my guess would be, if the media doesn't pick it up now, either the moment that he officially locks up the nomination, or deeper into the presidential campaign, you'll then at that point you'll see kind of the right force the media to start covering it. And Democrats might regret by then that they didn't just hash this out now. Like, just talk it out now, go through it, study it, and move it through the system. Perhaps it involves an apology for misunderstandings, or however politicians handle these sorts of things. But they might regret sitting on it and seeing it burst into the open, months from now.
Yeah, sort of shades of 2016, like, Bernie, don't talk about, the speeches Hillary Clinton's given, or, the money that she's taken. Don't bring that stuff up. And then the general election comes. Oh, wait, it's a big story. No one could have seen it coming.
Yeah. How about that? Isn't that strange?
Exactly.
How that happened? I even, at one point, I didn't think they would do this, but I reached out to the Clinton campaign, I think in 2015, and I even made the argument. I was like, look, your speeches are going to come out somehow or another. Just leak them to me now. It'll be terrible for you for a day, but it'll get it over with. And the spokesperson said, let me run that up the chain. And I don't know if she ever even bothered to, but the answer came back, no, we're going to sit on these. And of course, they were not going to sit on them. The WikiLeaks dumped them in October.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we don't have much time, but I do want to talk about another one of your recent articles. Everyone is wondering, if Joe Biden does end up becoming the nominee, who is he going to choose as his running mate? And not totally unrelated topic, how are the different factions of the party, even hypothetically, supposed to come together after all that we've experienced? Ryan Grimm, who's on the show, you had an article a couple weeks back that you wrote with Jeremy Scahill, I believe, where you talked about I want to read one or two quotes from your article to give people an idea. So you said at the time, to avoid a scenario in which President Donald Trump uses the pandemic to his advantage while risking the lives of millions of Americans, the Biden and Bernie Sanders campaigns could broker a split ticket of Biden-Sanders with a clear, publicly announced, historically powerful role for Elizabeth Warren, presumably Secretary of the Treasury. Now, you acknowledged right afterward that that would likely enrage many people, including, you said, the authors of the piece that quote is from. So why do you think that would potentially help? Who would actually be pleased if that were to happen? And how likely do you think it is to happen?
Well, I guess there are a couple questions that you have to ask before you decide whether or not you think this is a useful idea to proceed. One of them is, how important is it to defeat Donald Trump with anybody? And so there are plenty of Democrats, as we saw through the primary, who answer that question. That's all that matters. Any carcass that you put up on that ballot, we're going to drag across the finish line just to beat Donald Trump. And if we get anything useful beyond that, then we're grateful. Then you have some who are all the way on the other end who say, no, Donald Trump is just the symptom of a diseased system. If you don't cure this system, you're just going to keep getting more and worse Donald Trumps. And so unless you can put in somebody who is going to bring about a full-scale revolution to the politics of the country, like a Bernie Sanders, then forget it. You're just making the problem worse. But then, within those two extremes, you have a lot of other voters who some might say, all right, look, there is no conceivable path that Bernie Sanders has at this moment to the nomination. The most likely chance he would have of being president would be to be Joe Biden's vice president. Joe Biden has made has made it. He commented himself that he wants to have someone who's ready to govern immediately because, as he said, "quote I'm an old guy." I think was his exact quote. Like he's kind of saying the quiet part that we're all thinking out loud. On the related to that, though, who else can actually unify the party? You can't put Ocasio-Cortez as vice president. She's not old enough. Even if you use the Pete Buttigieg, experience metric to say that she's, ready for it. Elizabeth Warren never endorsed Bernie Sanders. Does not have the credibility with a lot of Bernie Sanders base that she would need to kind of bring the party together.
And really fast, her coming on to serve with Biden would be seen as more reason for her to not get that credibility back, I think, amongst most of those people. Right.
It would be a self-affirming kind of thing, or self-negating kind of thing. So the only answer left is Bernie Sanders. And if he picked Bernie Sanders, it would be such a swallowing of his pride and ideology that in order to not necessarily guarantee, but almost assure himself of getting elected, that you'd have to take that seriously. Joe Biden does not want Bernie Sanders anywhere near a Joe Biden administration. So if he actually did that, it would be a signal that he was quite open to governing in a different kind of way. And if you're Bernie Sanders and you're the vice president and the president is Joe Biden, and you can't kind of work your will in that administration, then you don't deserve to be there anyway. Joe Biden is not the most intimidating figure at this point. He can't get through a cable news interview without reading from notes. So
he's hardly LBJ.
Right. Yeah. So a vice president Sanders could be extraordinarily powerful if it was his movement that kind of powered Biden over the finish line.
So really fast, how likely do you think that is to happen?
Well, it seems close to zero at this point because he maybe like 90 minutes after we published this piece, Biden went out on the debate stage and said that he would pick a woman as his vice president. So unless he reneges on that, then that rules Bernie Sanders out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there was even before he publicly sort of said that he would do that, I thought it was incredibly likely anyway. Right. I think a lot of people would be frustrated.
He had been, yeah.
Exactly. But interesting thought experiment in any event. We always appreciate your writing. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I know that, the very vocal fan base that lost interest in me immediately, they were happy to see you here. And so there will always be a spot for you on the Damage Report, Ryan.
Always happy to come back.
Thank you. And stay safe.
You too.
Okay, everybody. That was great. It was great to have Ryan on. We're going to have another guest in just a moment. We're going to be doing something we haven't done before, which is live switching to a new guest and connecting to them and hoping that it works smoothly. And the reason we're doing that is because I don't have any other way to do it. But I also wanted to quick update you. We are hypothetically going to be doing a little bit more weeding out of bots. Hopefully, we'll see. I saw Nightbot was active at least a little bit. That's the one bot that we like. We'll see if that works. I want to really fast respond to a couple of your comments before we get our next guest, Benjamin Dixon, who I'm very excited to have back on the show. Last time he was on, we had a great talk. Josh N. had said, what do you think about Johnson & Johnson saying they're investing $1 billion to find a vaccine? Normally, I'm against pharma company practices, but in a pandemic, I'm glad they have the money to do so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so long as they're not investing that $1 billion because they expect they're going to be able to jack up the price and make $50 billion or $100 billion. They should be compensated, obviously, if they're the ones that make a big breakthrough, but people need access to it. They need universal free access to it. Okay. Denise had said, thanks, John. Just upgraded to activist level. I can afford it since I canceled my New York Times after the hit piece on Shank. Well, thank you, Denise, for becoming a member. Name withheld says 2 guests. You're spoiling us. We have another guest who's going to be coming up live after, or not live after, I apologize, but Ken Klippenstein's going to be coming on the show, so that video will be on the channel. Like I always say, other interviews are being uploaded to the YouTube channel. Not everything is live, so you're going to want to check. Yesterday, I had an interview with a candidate. We had a great talk about coronavirus and all that. That's up. Dave says, do you think the Politico story was an attempt to drive a wedge between AOC and Bernie and the left? I don't know. I can't read people's minds. That we're just going to have to continue to evaluate what they do and what they say, what they stand for. JD Wilder says, hey, John, I joined TYT because of your delivery of the news. I don't care about the Kardashians. Okay, well, thank you. Name withheld says, I want to know why no one talks about guaranteed rent reductions for a year. Ask landlords why they charge so much and help them to reduce it. Well, Ryan was talking about it, and we've certainly been advocating for that. I know AOC has been talking a lot about a need to cancel rent, but long-term rent reductions is a great idea as well, because just canceling it then creates the problem for the landlords, which is a smaller problem, but still a problem. And Kuju says, it's just like the flu. It's the flu, a reference to yesterday's show. So let's see if we can get Benjamin on now. There's a few things we're looking forward to talking about with him. We're doing this live, like they do on TV. Hello, Benjamin.
This is me.
How's it going, Benjamin? Glad to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me again, John. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And what a smooth entrance to the show. I was really worried about doing that live. And no, your audio is better than mine. So thank you for your professionalism under difficult circumstances.
No problem. It's I've had to do these. I've had to jerry rig shows for many years, so I knew what to do.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of us have had to I used to do my show way back in the day. I used to shoot it here, but then I've had a couple of years of easy living in a studio, so I had to relearn some of those things. But we're very excited to have you on. There's a few different topics we're looking forward to talking about with you. And I already saw the first comment I saw from King Kentona says Benjamin Dixon is a boss. So, and Noah says I like this Benjamin Dixon gentleman. So they're happy to.
But hey, I love it. Thanks. I appreciate the support. Hey, let's hopefully I can live up to it. Let's see what happens.
Let's see. We're gonna roll the dice on that. So with that, why don't we launch into our first conversation? So it's insane, but coming up on this next Tuesday, Wisconsin is still planning to have their primary, despite the fact that they are taking other measures to limit people's contact with each other. Wisconsin has ordered residents to stay at home, shuttered non-essential businesses, and banned all public and private gatherings of any number of people, but is still planning to proceed with an election on Tuesday. Now, bear in mind, every other state that was supposed to hold a presidential primary contest in late March or April has postponed their elections or switched to vote by mail. So, Benjamin, we could have a primary on Tuesday as the number of coronavirus cases and deaths is still increasing on a day-to-day basis. What do you think about the decision by Wisconsin?
I think it's consistent with what we saw in Florida, and now we see people are dying in Florida, right? I think it's highly irresponsible, but it also shows a level of desperation that the establishment has. They want to bring this to an end as quickly as possible, and that itself is a story, right? In the face of this global pandemic, in which the United States is becoming the new epicenter, they are more concerned with saving their own power than they are actual policies that would help solve this pandemic. And those policies are the policies of Bernie Sanders. And again, it's not because Bernie Sanders is so great. It's that he's advocating for the right things. But instead of being more concerned about that, they're focused on how can they expedite this this process, even if it means sending people to the polls to get sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess we're supposed to be like nice and not point out the cost in human lives that this will create, but it's not even hypothetical. Like Florida, right. We know people became infected with coronavirus as a result of going to the polls, and that, like, who could possibly say that holding an election in person, having people congregate in a time when we don't want two people standing next to each other in a Starbucks, we're going to have people line up at places we're going to have senior citizen poll workers and things like that, that is going to lead to infections. It's going to lead to deaths. There's already 1,550 cases in Wisconsin. There have been 25 deaths. Like, I don't see how you can possibly make the case as one of the officials in Wisconsin that this is the moral, the ethical, even the pragmatic thing to do when you can postpone it and still have the vote, but under safe circumstances.
Right. It's gaslighting of the highest order. And this is what we've seen across the country. We knew what was happening at the beginning of March. Right. We had an idea. Let me put it in better context. We had an idea of what was coming. But by the time we got to Super Tuesday 2, right, when Florida was voting, this is the type of rhetoric that they were using, that it's the moral thing to do. But the moral thing to do is to stay alive and not help spread a pandemic that is costing so many lives. So I just think it's a deep moral failing that's being sold to us as the moral thing to do. And I think that's the quintessential definition of gaslighting.
Yeah. It's just a disastrous decision to make. Now, thankfully, there are some who are trying to push them in the right direction. A statement was put out from the Bernie Sanders campaign saying people should not be forced to put their lives on the line to vote, which is why 15 states are now following the advice of public health experts and delaying their elections. We urge Wisconsin to join them. He also called on states to extend early voting once the election had been pushed back and work to move entirely to vote by mail. As of right now, it seems crazy, but the Biden campaign has not put out a statement on Wisconsin. So they're at least not encouraging people to do it like they did in the last go-around of primaries, but they are not actually putting any pressure. The presumptive nominee is not putting any pressure on Wisconsin to not go ahead with this.
That's because the people who surround Joe Biden do not care, as evidenced by the fact that Super Tuesday 2, they sent people to the polls. They encouraged them. And now they're just going to be quiet about it. They're more concerned with getting power. And here's a distinct difference, right? So as this pandemic started taking root in our country, Bernie Sanders started shifting his campaign to focusing solely on the pandemic, the policies that would help us survive the pandemic, and even raising money on behalf of people for the pandemic. And what we see on the other side of the aisle is politics as usual. You see Joe Biden running the campaign as usual. He's still sending out his regular fundraising emails. He's still having these positions that go counter to what we need right now, right? He's avoiding the conversation on Medicare for all when people are literally dying. This is not hyperbole, but people have died because they did not have insurance and could not be seen at there's one young man who died at a urgent care facility because they would not see him because he didn't have insurance. And so we have one campaign that's running a campaign that's people-centered, focused on helping us survive this pandemic, and then we have Joe Biden.
Yeah, and we've got more to say about him. But before we move on, what do you think about the news broke today that the Democratic National Convention that is going to be pushed back just by a month, which still seems kind of optimistic at this point.
Yeah.
I know that conversations are going on in DC right now about what needs to be done to prep for the possibility that we're not going to be entirely out of this even for the general election. And I know that they want funding to do vote by mail in time for the general election, but Republicans in the Senate and Donald Trump are like vigorously opposed to that. Trump even admitting that the Dems are trying to create too much voting out of this. What do you think is going to end up happening with the general election?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to vote by mail. See, what I don't think people have come to terms, at least not our political establishment. It has not come to terms that we are in a different world right now than we've ever seen. There will be no convention in what it was supposed to be June, so now they're saying July. No, there's not going to be a convention in July. We'll still be feeling the impact of this virus. We'll still be trying to get it under control. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we should shelter in place until there's a vaccine, and that's like a year from now. So the establishment is not being transparent with people, both the Democratic and Republican establishment. They're trying to get away with politics as usual as much as they possibly can because it protects their power. But there's some radical changes that have to take place just for our sheer survival. And part of it is, how are we going to carry out an election in the middle of a pandemic?
Exactly. And not expect that far more people are going to die. I mean, the idea that we'll have a vaccine by then seems basically impossible. Now, it's possible that, people will have developed some level of natural resistance to it as a result of a large percentage of the population being exposed to it at that point. That seems like a worst case scenario. But they really need to get on this. I'm glad that there are some politicians like Bernie Sanders who are pushing for that. And not saying that we should start thinking about it in a few months, but that we should be putting the infrastructure in place right now. Infrastructure, by the way, which would be great even after we're no longer thinking about the coronavirus, we're way past it, making sure that we enshrine actual in reality access to democracy, to your vote actually counting right now. That would pay dividends in future elections and help to fight back against some of the massive suppression that we have in many states that predates, by a long time, the coronavirus. Like we could really kill two birds with one stone here if we take this seriously.
Right, but that would mean we're dealing with some good faith actors, right?
Yeah.
That would mean that we're dealing with a system that honestly just didn't know that there was a way we could do it better. In fact, that they thrive on the fact that they can make voting as difficult as they possibly can. And that's one of the biggest things that this coronavirus has exposed to me. Actually, it was before the coronavirus. I think it was the Michael Bloomberg issue that really exposed to me that we're surrounded by bad faith actors that understand exactly what we need to solve our problems, but they never intended on solving those problems in the first place.
Yeah, because we call them problems, but they're not problems for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's their way of maintaining power.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Let's move on to Joe Biden. I've been following your social media activity. I know this is something that you've been thinking about a lot. So why don't we transition to this? Sure. Joe Biden is being talked about as the presumptive nominee. He certainly does have a lead of many delegates, and things seem to be set up in a way that it's extremely unlikely that he will not be the nominee. So what will he be if he is the nominee? One thing that's been causing a lot of concern lately is measures of enthusiasm for the supporters of different candidates. So take a look at this chart. This is going to be on the left. You see among Trump supporters, the very enthusiastic group is 53%. Somewhat is 32%. So that's effectively everybody. Only 14% are not at all enthusiastic. Biden has less than half the measure of very enthusiastic supporters, nearly 49% somewhat, and then more than a quarter who are not so or not at all enthusiastic. And I've already seen articles that are trying to reassure us that doesn't mean anything. There's no reason to be worried about that. I wonder if those people have any memory of what happened in 2016, because when I see those numbers, I get a little bit worried, Ben.
Yeah. He's not. People are less enthusiastic about Joe Biden than they were Hillary Clinton, and I mean that really matters. So you also have to look at the level of I'm going to use my words. I don't want to say anything wrong here, but Donald Trump has very committed voters who would go to the polls to their death on behalf of their leader. Right. That's enthusiasm. So you look at Joe Biden in the midst of a pandemic. People on a good day aren't excited about Joe Biden. What do you think they're going to be in the middle of the pandemic? You think any significant numbers of people are going to risk their lives to go to the polls? So Donald Trump knows this. So it's kind of a double thing, right? Donald Trump knows this. This is why he's not going to encourage voting by mail. But then also the lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden on a sunny day. Now we're talking about the middle of a global pandemic. Joe Biden is going to lose, and I don't want him to lose. We need to get rid of Donald Trump. We have to preface it with that. Donald Trump is a unique threat to us, but no one is motivated about Joe Biden.
And when you say that, like, honestly, I would include Joe Biden in that group. I'm in the middle of writing an op-ed right now with the title, Does Joe Biden Even Want to Be President? Which seems, I guess, like a crazy question because he's been running for more than a year. He's run multiple times through the course of his life. But when I watch him in his short, sporadic, sort of begrudging media appearances recently, he does not give off to me the aura of a guy who desperately wants to be in a position where he can fix the problems that America faces and that he will do anything to get there. Like, we're facing this pandemic, and he's effectively said, you know, to directly attack Trump over it, that's playing politics. You know, I want to come together. I don't want to attack the president over it. Like, this is what people are going to be deciding based on, in large part, I think. And so I wonder, does he have the enthusiasm, the fight in him to actually get it done, to win in any way other than maybe squeaking by, sort of sliding past the 50% mark?
You know, you have to. I think that's a great question because now you put it into context, and I'm wondering, does he have any fight in him? Like, what does he fight against? Because he's always fought to have bipartisanship with Republicans who never lifted a finger to have bipartisanship back with him and Democrats, right? But the biggest thing that you've ever seen Joe Biden's advocate for was reaching across the aisles, which ultimately meant that we were moving towards the right all of the years that he's been in the Senate. Which is pretty factual. So I don't think, not only does he not have the energy, right? I actually love, I don't know if you have that graphic or the audience have seen his new graphic of him looking like he's running. They try their best to make him look like he's full of life and vigor. So it's not really just a comment and a statement in terms of him having a lack of energy because of his age and his failing health, but it's also the fact that even at his best, he never really fought for the things that we wanted for. He always fought on behalf of working with Republicans, no matter what that meant.
So I had not seen the graphic that you're talking about. I'm assuming this is it.
That's it. Like, he looks so young and vigorous. Like he's going out to just take a little brisk run.
It's a good picture.
But it's a lie. It's a huge fabrication. If you ever see him moving in real life, like, people are carrying him around by his arms and stuff, like, and you know, I hope, all things considered, I'd be lucky to get his age at this point, right? A lot of us are going to get taken out by this virus, and I want to be old enough to have to take a fake picture of me running to convince people that I'm young and vigorous.
Yeah, and like, I know some people, like, when we joke about that, some people will be like, why are you being so unfair? Like, I want to make clear, I didn't come into this election hating Joe Biden. I don't hate Joe Biden right now, even though there's like a direct financial and career incentive to hate him because, you know, I'm in left alternative media. Right. No, I don't, but I do disagree with him fundamentally. And I am extremely scared about what he would be like as a candidate, because, as you said, like, I desperately think that we need an end to Donald Trump in the White House. And so I want us to get there. Like, if I felt like Biden actually was a lock for it, I would be much more comfortable. I wouldn't have, you know, like, wrinkles sprouting on a weekly basis at this point, and stress lines and all that. But yeah, but I am nervous, and it's going to take more than a little bit of, like, Photoshop on his Twitter account to reassure me.
I wonder how long it took them to get that picture. Listen, I'm with you. I don't have any personal gripe with Joe Biden outside of his really bad politics and these allegations that are circling him. In terms of him as a person, other than that, like, what I say about him has nothing to do with it has everything to do with policy. And the policies that he's advocating for, or rather he's advocating against, are literally the things that we need to survive this pandemic. So if I take a second to kind of mock the fact that they really worked hard to put that picture together to make him look young and vigorous, I mean, it's really the low-hanging fruit compared to what he's advocating against.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would say that to the extent that he does really talk about policy, it is more what he opposes, mostly in Bernie Sanders, honestly. Obviously, there's a little bit in terms of what he opposes in Donald Trump, but it's less like, this is the thing I've wanted to see happen my whole life, and I have to become president to see it happen. So I'm going to become president. I'm going to do this thing. There are candidates that fit that. Bernie Sanders is a great example. I don't see that out of Joe Biden.
No, I don't think Joe Biden, and honestly, I'm with you with your original premise. I don't think he actually cares about running or winning as much as securing it away from Bernie Sanders.
Exactly. And he's not the only one. So why don't we transition into our next topic where we have other examples of that. I can't say in advance, Ben, I can't say for sure you're going to be able to hear this video, but I hope so. And if not, I will fill you in.
Okay.
So yesterday on the show, we talked about one of the promos for The View that was quite hostile to Bernie Sanders. Maybe we'll watch that a little bit later on. And so since that show, the actual interview has happened, and I want to show you a clip of Whoopi Goldberg talking to Bernie Sanders. Here she is.
You intend to stay in this race for president because you believe there is a path to victory. I want to know what that path is, because this feels a little bit like it did when you didn't come out when Hillary Clinton was clearly the person folks were going for. So can you explain why you're still in the race and what this path is that you see?
One of the reasons, but that's not quite accurate. I worked as hard as I could to for Hillary Clinton. But the reason there is a path
Bernie,
towards
just so we're clear, you worked for Hillary, but it took you a very, very long time to hop in, and your people also. It took a very long time for them to hop in. So when I say that, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so there you saw Whoopi not only setting that up, and obviously, there was a bit of a spin on the initial question, but then cutting him off to add on her continuing anger against him for daring to stay in, but also his base. I mean, this is going to be something that obviously inflames them for literally the rest of their lives. And as he's coming on the show to advocate mostly for Medicare for all, which this pandemic has made even more clear is needed, and a lot of people seem to be accepting that. But all she wanted to do was to just hit him with, you're staying in too long, you're hurting Joe Biden, it's gonna be more likely that Trump wins re-election.
Yeah. No, this is. I like Whoopi Goldberg and Sister Act 1 and Sister Act 2.
Agreed. Also, Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yes. Oh man, Guinan. She was everything is Guinan, right?
She was.
But she is complete trash in terms of her politics and her political analysis and her disingenuousness and her bad faith engagement, all in order to protect her profit, like her wealth. I mean, there's that argument that she just presented to Bernie Sanders was wrong, was fallacious. It was an outright lie. Bernie Sanders gave Hillary Clinton a full-throated endorsement. He gave her more of a glowing endorsement than he ever imagined he would have to. Like, I could not believe the fact that he said all those flattering things for her, and he did it. And he did it soon enough to go and do some 30-odd engagements on her behalf. It would never be enough.
I think
this
42.
is the whole thing.
I think
42. It will never be enough for the establishment, because the establishment is not interested in us. The establishment wants to suppress the progressive movement. If you want to see what the establishment fights for, it's the fight against the progressive movement. Have you ever seen Democrats coalesce around an idea the way they coalesced around opposing Bernie Sanders?
Exactly. I mean, he drives them insane. He just does. Yeah. And his base possibly even more. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it becomes a very personal grudge match for them, and as evidenced by what Whoopi Goldberg did in that clip that you played, right? It is a nasty, bitter, they are actually projecting onto the Bernie bros what they engage in themselves on a regular basis.
And I'm also curious, let me play for people who might have missed it, the promo, because I want your thoughts about the way they framed his advocacy for Medicare for all as well.
Bernie Sanders answer accusations that he's politicizing the pandemic to push his Medicare for all agenda, and that staying in the race could guarantee Trump another term. He's live on The View. Next.
So, look, yesterday I said it's not just that he's politicizing coronavirus to push his agenda, but then the smiling picture of Bernie, as if look at how happy he is that he's screwing you all over. This is a show that reaches millions of people literally every day. What do you think about the way they're spinning this policy that seems like it would really help a lot of people, and that polls are showing more and more people are interested in?
So you could see it in the picture that they chose. On any other appearance, anytime someone talks about Bernie and they're not flattering him, then they would use an image of him looking mean and mad but in this case, what they did was they picked a picture of him smiling, like he was giddy about messing up the campaign. That's what they're trying to convey. And so the deal is that it's such a bad faith argument. We are in the middle of a global pandemic. The United States is the new epicenter. Millions of people are going to need treatment. And a lot of people won't even go seek it because they don't have health care. And so advocating on behalf of Medicare for all is literally the moral thing to do right now in this moment. But they could not frame it like that because that would give him the advantage in this primary that's still ongoing.
Yeah, exactly. I guess just to zoom out a little bit, we talked about sort of the structure of the primary, how that's likely to go forward. What do you think the end result is going to be? Do you think that effectively they're going to be successful in one way or another in locking this thing up for Joe Biden? And if so, I'm curious what you think about the theories that I've seen about the possibility that he could be replaced at the convention by someone else, possibly like Andrew Cuomo, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a reality. I think the Democratic Party has. Listen, when they coalesced around Super Tuesday, the first Super Tuesday, I was like, okay, that was actually a brilliant political move. You couldn't really do anything but take a step back and say, damn, they got us. It was a good move. But since then, the world is starting to fall apart around us because of this pandemic. And like Naomi Klein said, reality is endorsing. It continues to endorse Bernie Sanders. They want to end the primary extremely quickly because the pandemic is showing how much we need the policies of Bernie Sanders. Right. And so they're really pushing as hard as they can to bring this to an end. If they get their way, I think they'll win. But then they're going to lose in the general election to Donald Trump.
But you think that in the end it will still end up being Biden, that he's not going to either be pushed out or pull himself out over health concerns or whatever and be replaced by someone else?
Yeah. So if they do, if they pull it with Andrew Cuomo, I mean, there's we haven't even begun the vetting of Andrew Cuomo. But here's the thing, the deal is if they pull that, then they give us a legitimate excuse to reject the candidate. When I say us, I mean progressives, leftists, because they would have stolen democracy from right underneath us. There would be no pretense. There would be, it would just be the machinations of a party. And so it would be political folly for them to try that. But I think that they're stupid enough to try that.
Yeah. I really wonder. I mean, it seems so crazy to think back to maybe a month ago when we were still worried that somehow Bloomberg's money was going to end up with him as the nominee, and it was all hands on deck to fight against him. And now it's honestly, who even knows with the pandemic that we're experiencing right now? It seems insane that they would pull him out and throw someone in there like Andrew Cuomo, who says he's not running and all that. But right. I guess we can't rule out anything.
Yeah.
Benjamin, it's always great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And I'm looking at your picture now, man. This production quality is amazing. So I'm going to text you for some tips. All right.
Awesome. I mean, I love talking about tech. And in the meantime, where can people watch your show? Where can they see your work?
The best place to find me is on Twitter at Benjamin P. Dixon on Twitter, or they can go to thebenjamindixonshow.com to get access to these to the podcast. Yeah.
Awesome. Benjamin, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Okay, everybody, there were a few comments I want to respond to before we wrap up the show. I do want to say, hopefully you've all noticed a reduction in the amount of bots. I've been doing a bit of, so I didn't have enough things to be doing live while talking on the show, so I also started weeding out bots while it was going on. One ear on the guests, the other on the bots, because I know that, it really puts off people from interacting with the show when there's so much of that going on. But I've been trying to do that. Hopefully that worked. So we're gonna test that going forward. Hopefully they don't just come up with new ones every single day. But anyway, on to some of the comments that I've been sort of accruing as we've been doing the show. David Baker said, "John, don't be sad. We watch the show because we love you." Thank you. I appreciate that. And John Cordero, thank you for your super chat as well. Lil Yumper said, "Great guest and great show as always. Thoughts on Alyssa Milano ignoring the allegations against Biden and calling Bernie supporters toxic?" So, look, I appreciate a lot of what Alyssa Milano does. I know she advocates on a number of different issues that are important to her. I don't always agree with her, obviously, and I supported Bernie in this race. Now, she supported Bernie in 2016. Let's bear that in mind. That doesn't mean that she's not wrong to discount people's concerns about this now. So, look, we'll see. In social media, and especially in a time of a pandemic and incredible stress like this, it's possible that people can feel backed into a corner and attacked, and sometimes they say things or respond in ways that they will later prefer that they or wish that they had not. So we'll see going forward. Camille says, "I watch this almost every day, and today is awesome." Thank you, Camille. This was our first ever 2-guest show on Lockdown Edition, so maybe we'll do more of that in the future. Lil Yumper says Whoopi supports Roman Polanski, so that says a lot. Yeah, a lot of celebrities do. That's a big blind spot for a lot of them. And Roman Polanski's not the only one. Ronald Harper had sent in a comment saying, off subject, have you ever used anything like Tabletop Simulator? 100% I've used Tabletop Simulator. I've recently played games of both Euphoria and Cthulhu Wars like 2 weeks ago with some friends online. And if you're looking for something to pass the time and give you some connection to people that you can't see in person, I think Tabletop Simulator is a great way to do that. And there's a lot of great tutorials online on how to use it. Basically, it's a sort of sandbox that allows you to play board games online and multiplayer. Ed says, thank you for helping me keep my sanity in a world of gaslighting. One of the best shows ever. Great guest too. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Yeah, I respect and appreciate the work of both Ryan and Benjamin a ton, as well as our guest that's coming up a little bit later on, not live. That's Ken Klippenstein. I'll be recording an interview with him about his most recent article for The Nation. Broken says, love the show, brother. Broken, I love you, brother. Thank you. And Ellie says, thank you for getting rid of bots. Show's great. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna keep doing that. It's not to say that there aren't any, but we're trying to keep it down just a little bit. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. As I've said a couple times throughout the show, you're definitely going to want to check the channel for videos that are not live. Those will be uploaded. Also, if you notice that we were talking about articles, like for instance, Ryan Grimm, we covered 2 of his recent articles. Those will be linked in the videos when the videos themselves go up live. You know, there's this whole show, and then later on sections of it will be uploaded if you just want to watch those. In the comment or in the notes of that, the description, there should be links if you want to take a look at those articles. Okay. Everybody, thank you for joining me. Lots planned for tomorrow, where we'll see the return of Brett Ehrlich. We're going to have a new top 10 list, as well as the garbage people of the week. So a little bit of fun to close out the week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and I'll see you tomorrow.